The days after that kiss felt unreal, like I was moving through my own life while carrying a secret that grew heavier with every breath. Used to believe that betrayal only happened in other people's lives, the kind of stories you listen to with curiosity but never imagine becoming part of. My name is Maya. I'm 32 years old, and for a long time I thought my life was settled, predictable, and safe. I was married to Daniel for 5 years, living in a quiet house in the suburbs, surrounded by routines that felt comforting on the surface. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But perfection has a way of hiding emptiness, and I didn't realize how vulnerable I was until someone unexpected stepped into our home. It started innocently enough. Daniel's nephew, Ethan, needed a place to stay for a while. Daniel was busy with work and asked me to pick him up from the bus station. I remember standing there in the lobby, distracted and tired, when I saw Ethan walking toward me. Something shifted in my chest before I could stop it. He was tall, confident, and carried himself with an ease that felt completely different from Daniel. When we introduced ourselves, our handshake lingered just a second too long, and I felt my heart react in a way that startled me. On the drive home, Ethan talked about his life as a travel blogger, his recent trip to Japan, the places he had seen, the freedom he lived with. I found myself listening more closely than I had listened to anyone in years. His voice carried excitement, and for the first time in a long while, I felt mentally awake. I told myself it was just curiosity, just boredom finally being interrupted, nothing more. But deep down, I knew something dangerous had already been set in motion. That evening, the three of us sat down for dinner. Daniel talked about work, meetings, deadlines, the same stories I had heard countless times before. I nodded at the right moments, smiled when expected, but my attention kept drifting. Ethan sat across from me, and every so often our eyes met. Each glance sent a quiet rush through my body, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. It scared me how alive it made me feel. After dinner, Daniel suggested playing cards, something he always enjoyed. I declined, claiming I was tired, and went to bed early. Lying in the dark, I stared at the ceiling, trying to understand what was happening to me. I knew it was wrong to feel this way about Ethan. He was family. He was staying under our roof. And yet my mind kept wandering to the way he smiled, the sound of his laughter, the way he made me feel seen without even trying. I wondered what it would be like if I stopped fighting the feeling. That thought alone made my chest tighten with both fear and temptation. Over the next few days, I noticed small things. Ethan would catch my eye from across the room, his gaze lingering just long enough to make me question whether it was intentional. Sometimes our hands brushed when we passed each other, and each accidental touch sent a quiet spark through me. My connection with Daniel had slowly turned into habit, comfortable but distant. With Ethan, everything felt new, unpredictable, and intoxicating. One evening, while Daniel was working late, Ethan suggested playing pool in the game room. I laughed and told him I didn't know how. He smiled and offered to teach me. I hesitated, then agreed, telling myself it was harmless. He explained the rules patiently, his tone calm and reassuring. When it was my turn, he stepped behind me to help with my stance. His hands rested lightly on my waist, guiding me. Then he adjusted my arms, showing me how to hold the cue. I could feel his breath near my ear, and my heart began pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. When I finished my shot, I turned to face him, and we froze. The space between us felt charged, heavy with everything we hadn't said. Our eyes locked, and in that moment, I knew I was standing at a line I could never uncross. Ethan leaned in, and instead of stepping back, I moved closer. Our lips met softly at first, then with a hunger that shocked me. It felt like a spark turning into fire, consuming every rational thought I had left. I pulled away, breathless and overwhelmed. I knew it was wrong. I knew the consequences could destroy everything I had built. But standing there, my heart racing and my hands trembling, all I could think about was how alive I felt in that moment. That single kiss changed something inside me, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't undo it. That night, as I lay in bed beside my husband, staring into the darkness, I realized the life I thought was so stable had already begun to crack. And I didn't yet know how deep those cracks would go. The days after that kiss felt unreal. Like I was moving through my own life while carrying a secret that grew heavier with every breath. I tried to act normal around Daniel, answering his questions, sharing meals, pretending nothing had changed. But inside, my thoughts kept drifting back to Ethan. Every memory of that moment replayed itself, refusing to fade, and with it came a mix of guilt and longing that left me restless and distracted. Ethan didn't pull away either. If anything, his attention became more noticeable. The glances lasted longer. The smiles felt more intimate. We never said anything out loud, but the silence between us spoke volumes. One evening, he asked if I wanted to go for a walk, just to get some fresh air. I agreed, telling myself it would help clear my head. We talked about his travels, about dreams we once had, about how easy it is to feel stuck when life becomes nothing but routine. His voice was calm and reassuring, and I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't with Daniel in years. We stopped near a quiet bench and sat down side by side. The closeness stirred something familiar inside me. Ethan asked if I ever got tired of living the same day over and over again. I admitted that sometimes it felt like my life was standing still. He told me that real change always required risk, that nothing meaningful came without consequences. When I looked at him, I understood exactly what he meant. Our eyes met, and the air between us shifted again. This time, when he leaned in, I didn't resist. The kiss was deeper, filled with emotion I could no longer deny. When we returned home, Daniel was back from work. Ethan and I slipped easily into our roles, acting like nothing had happened. It amazed me how convincing we could be, even while my heart was racing. Over the next few days, our stolen moments continued. Quick touches when no one was looking. Quiet conversations that ended too soon. Each interaction pulled me further away from the woman I used to be, and closer to a version of myself I barely recognized that one evening. While Daniel was working late again, Ethan suggested we cook dinner instead of ordering food. The kitchen felt different that night, charged with unspoken desire. As we worked side by side, his hands brushed against mine, then rested briefly at my waist as he showed me how to prepare an old family recipe. He admitted he knew what we were doing was wrong, but said he couldn't stop himself. I confessed I felt the same. The honesty in that moment felt dangerously comforting, and when we moved closer, the pull between us was impossible to ignore. The next morning, Daniel left early for work and asked if I wanted to come with him. I declined, needing time alone to think. After he left, the house felt unusually quiet. I tried to focus on my thoughts, but my mind kept circling back to Ethan, wanting to clear my head. I decided to take a shower, hoping the water would calm me. Instead, my thoughts only grew louder, replaying every glance, every touch, every whispered moment we had shared. I was lost in thought when the bathroom door opened unexpectedly. My heart nearly stopped when I realized it was Ethan, standing there watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. I knew I was standing at the edge of something irreversible. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, and in that moment, all restraint slipped away. What followed was not just physical closeness, but an emotional surrender that left me shaken and certain that there was no turning back. After that morning, nothing felt the same. I carried the weight of what we had done everywhere I went. I tried to behave normally, but Daniel began acting distant, distracted, as if something was troubling him. One day, he confronted me with a message he had seen on my phone and a small detail in the bathroom that didn't belong. The look in his eyes was a mixture of anger and hurt that made my chest tighten. I tried to explain, but my words sounded weak even to me. Later, I told Ethan that Daniel suspected something. He said we would have to be more careful, that he didn't want to lose me. His words comforted me, even as fear settled deep in my stomach. We agreed to meet less openly, choosing a quiet spot by the river where we believed no one. I told myself this secrecy was temporary, that somehow everything would work out. That evening, as I sat beside Ethan on the bench, his hand warm in mine, I felt both relief and dread. When he leaned in to kiss me, I sensed something was wrong, a strange awareness that made my skin prickle. As we pulled apart, I looked up and saw a familiar figure standing in the distance, watching us. In that instant, I knew the truth had finally caught up with me. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. Standing there by the river, watching Daniel step out from the shadows, I felt the ground disappear beneath me. His face was tight with rage and disbelief, the kind of expression that doesn't fade easily. In that moment, I knew there was no explaining, no softening the truth. He had seen enough. Everything we tried to hide had been exposed in a single glance. He called our names, his voice sharp and shaking. I stood frozen, my hand slipping from Ethan's as reality crashed down on me. Ethan tried to speak, saying there was a misunderstanding that he could explain. Daniel cut him off instantly. There was nothing left to explain. The proof stood right in front of him, and the hurt in his eyes was deeper than any anger I had ever seen. He told us both to go home and pack our things. His words were final, heavy, and unforgiving. On the drive back, the silence was unbearable. I stared out the window, replaying every decision that had led to this moment. When we arrived, Daniel watched us collect our belongings. I tried to say his name, tried to apologize, but he refused to listen. When I handed him my keys, my hands were shaking. The door closed behind us with a force that echoed inside my chest. That sound marked the end of my marriage, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Ethan and I stayed at a cheap motel for a while, trying to figure out what came next. Eventually, we rented a small townhouse in a rough part of town. It wasn't comfortable, and it wasn't what I was used to, but it was all we could afford. I had to find a job for the first time in years, and the adjustment was harder than I expected. Each day felt exhausting, both physically and emotionally. I had gone from a life of stability to struggling just to get through the week. At first, Ethan tried to be supportive. He reassured me, held me when I cried, told me things would get better. But slowly, I noticed a change. The affection faded. The warmth disappeared. The man who once couldn't keep his eyes off me now seemed distant and distracted. The relationship that once felt intense and exciting began to feel empty. I sensed it slipping away, but I was too afraid to confront him. I had already lost so much. I couldn't bear the thought of losing him too. One evening, I came home from work and noticed something was wrong. When I walked into the bedroom, my heart dropped. Ethan's suitcase was open, clothes neatly folded inside. I felt dizzy, my chest tightening as panic set in. When I asked him what was going on, he looked at me differently than before. There was no tenderness in his eyes this time. He said he needed to be honest. He told me he never expected this situation to last, that he only planned for us to be together during his visit. His words cut deeper than anything Daniel had ever said. I asked him if everything we shared meant nothing. Tears streamed down my face as he avoided my gaze. He admitted he cared about me, but he never planned a future with me. He said staying would only lead me to expect something he couldn't give. I felt like my world was collapsing all over again. I had given up my marriage, my home, my sense of security, and now I was being told it was all for something temporary. He packed his bags and left that night. The door closed quietly behind him, but the silence that followed was unbearable. Not long after, the divorce papers arrived. Holding them in my hands made my body feel weak, like all the strength had drained out of me. I cried until there were no tears left, sitting alone in that small house, facing the consequences of my choices. I knew I couldn't blame anyone but myself. Time passed, slowly at first. I learned how to survive on my own. I worked, saved money, and eventually moved to a better area in a new town. Starting over wasn't easy, but it forced me to grow in ways I never had before. I made new friends, joined group activities, and began rebuilding a life that belonged only to me. When the final divorce document arrived, it hurt, but it also brought closure. I never heard from Ethan again. And maybe that was for the best. I learned that desire without honesty can destroy everything in its path. My story became a lesson carved into my heart. Life went on, and so did I, carrying the weight of my mistakes, but also the strength that came from surviving them.